as we bring in our buddy James Ham, who I just realized was clean shaven. Were you clean shaven this morning?
No, he was.
I didn't even notice it.
Yeah.
Valentine Ham.
Yeah, well, Ham got big plans tonight.
I made a mistake. I made a mistake this morning. I have a beard trimmer.
Yep.
And,
yep.
Clearly, somewhat like it had got my beard trimmer has a bag and it got pushed in, and I wasn't paying attention and went to shave, just trim my beard and realized that I took it down to nothing. I'm like, oh, that's a mistake.
Kenny would be kicked out of the house if that happened to him.
I would not be on the show if that happened. I wouldn't be on it for 2 weeks. Still grew back.
That's okay. I understand.
I almost just showed up with just a mustache. Just you guys would have booed me. Like, what is
that? I don't think that would have worked, man.
What is that? What's going on?
Hammer, we're talking about the future of the Sacramento Kings. And I had a moment during the Dallas game, and I tucked it away because they won, and then they beat New Orleans again. Or they beat New Orleans, and then they lost last night, and I felt like it was on display last night. I didn't love the way that the Kings played last night, and as I watched them, with admittedly a Kings detractor, and not a Kings detractor, just we know Trista doesn't love DeMar. She really does not like Zach LaVine. I feel like I just realized I don't think this team has a future, James.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
And if they do, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't want to be like the harbinger of like death here. Like, just like, let's just start carrying coffins like we're Dallas Mavericks people. But yeah, it's pretty bleak. And I mean, clearly they have draft picks, right? They're going to lose one either this year or next year. Or if they don't make the playoffs, they won't lose it at all, most likely. I mean, it's top 12 protected this year and top 10 after that, just in 2026. But, they have some extra draft picks. They have some extra stuff to work with, but they put themselves in a really bad situation. And you had a choice when you traded De'Aaron Fox. You could try to go out and find a player that was like him, that was around a similar age as him. Or you could really just like collect draft picks and try to start over. And, I think they chose a path, but it's a really complicated path forward. And I understand not wanting to go into full rebuild mode. And that totally makes sense because you've raised your ticket prices to a certain level. You don't want to go backwards. You're, as ownership, you made the playoffs once and you make some money in the playoffs, but you also got like the good vibes of being a playoff team and what that felt like. So I get not wanting to take a huge step backwards, but man, you made your path forward so incredibly difficult. And it's not just, that they chose Zach LaVine. And so you made this huge mistake with Zach LaVine. It's that you chose Zach LaVine, who has his own set of issues as a player, and you need to support Zach in a way that makes, to hide his deficiencies, just like you do, Domantas Sabonis, or when you had De'Aaron Fox or Malik Monk or anyone else. But at this point, it's just really complicated. Like you have a starting backcourt that, like I told you guys before they made the move for him, it's going to be difficult to hold anyone under 130 with the starting backcourt of Monk and LaVine.
Mm-hmm.
When you add in DeMar DeRozan's deficiencies as a defender, like you're giving yourself nowhere to go. Like we're gonna watch Domantas Sabonis for the next year and a half be in foul trouble all the time, like he has been since they made the trade. I mean, coming into last night's game, for the previous 6 games, he had 5 fouls or more. And it's because the perimeter guys aren't stopping anybody from getting to the middle, and he's caught on an island trying to protect the basket, and he's picking up fouls. He's also the only one standing under there going and getting rebounds half the time, and other teams are sending additional players, and he's getting fouled as a rebounder. He's picking up fouls as a rebounder because he doesn't have help. And these are issues that aren't going away. So I think you do put yourself in an awkward situation. I had someone describe it to me when they made the trade. It's like, well, they're done shopping for the next 2 years. And I'm like, You think it's that bad?" It's like, well, yeah, I mean, you have a $43 million player, another $40+ million player in Sabonis, a $25 million player in DeRozan, an 18 gonna be $20 million player next year in Malik Monk. Keegan Murray's at 10 million now, but you got to extend him after next season. So you're looking at between 20 and 30 million there. Like, you start looking at where their money's tied up, throw in Valanciunas at 10 million for next year and 10 million the next year. And it's a little bleak. This is your roster, and some of the players that you have are not worth draft capital, or they're negative value players. And I would say that that's the case right now for Zach LaVine, but it might be the case as well for DeMar DeRozan next season. You might be able to move off of his 25 million for next year, but you're not going to be able to go out and get like instant value for him. It would have to be a step back. And so, yeah, it's tough. You have to reconstruct how you're building that roster if this is how you're moving forward. If this is the group that you're moving forward with, and you got to find ways to get Keon Ellis on the floor. You got to find ways to get DeMar DeRozan probably off the bench at some point. And I don't know how you manage all of that, because it's a little bleak.
Man, Hammer said a lot there. One of the things about Sabonis, and I love DeMontis Sabonis,
Mm-hmm.
love DeMontis Sabonis. But if we're having these conversations, we need to have the conversations. And him as a defender is also part of the roster building problem. Like, you have to defend around him. And I think back, and I don't think he's a bad defender. I don't think he's a bad defender. I think he's better than people give him credit for, but he's never going to be mistaken for an all defensive center. And I think one of the teams that I thought back to was the Jazz team from about 4 or 5 years ago. And I crap on this guy a lot, but Rudy Gobert being in at the center position made just like kind of random NBA defenders look a lot better, because he would erase a lot of mistakes. Now in the playoffs, they figure out how to play him off the court, but like, yeah, those guys weren't these great defenders, but you had a Rudy Gobert that could help out with that. The Kings don't have that type of defender in the middle. Like, in before the last 5 games, like they show the stat every game now, Domantas Sabonis leads the league in fouls. That happened before Zach LaVine. That happened while De'Aaron Fox was there. Like, he fouls a lot, and the thing that I get across, like, I think all of those people, not those people, I shouldn't say it that way. All of those players have deficiencies. If you put them in different situations with different teammates, I think you could get by with all of them. LaVine, DeRozan, all these, Monk, all of them. But they all have a problem. That's kind of a bad mix, right? When they all need help. And that's just kind of where I think, like, Sabonis, that play last night that I keep talking about in overtime, that open three. Keegan, I don't know why he's in a trail technique on that sorry screen that was set. And I don't know why Domantas Sabonis is just pointing at CJ McCollum as he's wide open for a wing three.
Mm-hmm.
DeRozan and LaVine had nothing to do with that play. Their defense had nothing to do with that play. Those were those two guys who either weren't on the same page. Maybe it was the coaching scheme or whatever. But that's awful. That's a backbreaker. Those things happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly there's a problem. It's not just one player. It's not just two players. It's when you do collect a group of players that have a specific deficiency. But it's not like we didn't know who Zach LaVine is. We got 11 years of tape. It's not like you didn't know who DeMar DeRozan is. You had 16 years of tape. It's not like you didn't know who Domantas Sabonis was. Even before you extended him, he had been in the league for 7 years, 8 years, and then you extended him. Like, the idea of team building is pretty specific. If you're going to build your team around one or two players, you need to surround them with players that complement them and that they can mask each other's deficiencies, right? It's like team building 101. What you can't do is go out and get a whole bunch of players with the same exact deficiency and think that you're going to be able to survive. And then on top of that, you get a whole bunch of players who are at a certain skill level, so they're expensive. Guys who average 20 points a game are expensive. And, if you're going to bring in a bunch of 20-point per game scorers, you can't just bring in guys who are that play one side of the court. And so, yeah, I mean, Kenny, I don't disagree that like Sabonis is, he's part of the problem and not part of the solution when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. I will tell you that like defensively as a position defender in the post, he's one of the best in the game. You can look at the advanced statistics. He just doesn't block shots. And he also like that's so the help defense aspect of Domantas Sabonis, he doesn't fly over and even cut off a bunch of players that are like beating people off the dribble and getting to the basket. He's just not a good shot blocker. But that's why like we've been talking about this for a couple of years. If you have Sabonis, it's on you to go find a shot blocker to pair with him, not to play when he's off the court, to pair with him, somebody who can be a 3 and D4 or 3 and D5 and free him up to do what he does best, but mask some of his deficiencies. What you can't do is continuously go out and find players with the same exact weakness and then expecting that to be okay and for you to hold up on the defensive end. It doesn't matter how good of a defensive, like rotating team you are. It's just tough. And you can bring in guys like Keon Ellis, but everyone's complaining because he doesn't play enough minutes. Yeah, that's a problem. You need to find a way to get him minutes. You can bring in a Jake LaRavia and say, hey, look, he's good defensively. He's good defensively, but you can't really impact a defensive rating when you're playing 12 minutes a night. Same with Valanciunas. So the problem is that those core guys that you're starting alongside or that are playing 30 to 35 minutes a game, they can't all have the same weakness. And that's where I kind of see this team. And it's not just very specifically on the defensive end. They also have a problem that they brought in a group of players who don't shoot the three that well. In addition to the fact that they don't, so they don't really complement each other at all. And that's kind of a problem.
So real quick, like one of the things from last night specifically, and once again, it's not all his fault, but this is part of the stuff that don't get talked about.
Mm-hmm.
DeMontis and JV got lit up by Robinson Earl last night. Matt Tovich, however you say his name, him and Robinson Earl combined for 29 points. Like that can't happen. Like you can tell me a world where CJ goes for 43. Those two guys combined for 29 points, and they were what, 9 of 13 from the field? They were 5 of 8 from beyond the arc. Like that can't happen. That can't happen.
No, I get you. But again, like in all honesty, last night's game, very specifically in the fourth quarter, that was the wrong point of the game to try to run Jonas Valanciunas and Domantas Sabonis together. Like I get playing those guys against bigger lineups, but you can't play them against smaller lineups because then you're slow in rotations and you're going to get beat. And that's really when New Orleans caught fire. When you chose thinking, I think the thought process was, we'll just dominate them in the key. It's like, okay, well, they can shoot. Like you open a door for somebody to just bust you up from the outside, and then you're chasing your tail. Your rotations are slow. You got two bigs on the floor that don't react all that well. Domas isn't a horrible like defender against the 3-point shot either. He actually moves in space okay, but Jonas isn't. And so they're very specific styles of player, and you can't, if you're going to put them on the floor. I'm okay with that, but they've got to be on the floor with Keon Ellis, with Keegan Murray, with Jake LaRavia, like where you're hiding some of the deficiencies of those players by using what little length and athleticism you have and defensive acumen you have, because you are going to be slow. In those lineups, you should be really good in the pick and roll. You should be really good at the rim. You should be really good as a defensive rebounding team, maybe even an offensive rebounding team. But there are obvious pitfalls to running that lineup out there when it comes to defending the three or spacing.
So this team's not going to get better defensively before the end of the year, Hammer. So if Doug Christie is going to get this group to the playoffs, to winning a couple of play-in games, because it feels like 6 is getting further and further out of reach here, they're probably going to have to be better offensively. They're going to have to be a better collective team. And I asked this question to start the show, when your partner Kyle Madsen was here on the Insiders 10 to 12, how do you do that? Is it as simple as, and not that Malik said this was simple, but he did bring it up the other night. Are we talking about practice time? Are we talking about court time? Are we talking about all of these guys, being together and having an opportunity to kind of learn each other's tendencies maybe a little bit better than they know now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can get better with practice, and they're going to get a couple of days of practice, coming out of the break. For sure. Like you can clean up some of the rotations, like defensive rotations, not who's playing with who. You can work with who's playing with who and get better, like refining, how Levine and Domantas Sabonis play in like the pick and roll and stuff like that. But I do think that on the fly, what they're trying to do is they're trying to mask a few things by, like we talked to Mark Jones yesterday, and he said that they've inserted like 3 or 4 plays into the like rotation here of plays that Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan used with Chicago last year and the year before. And so they're trying to like give them some options. But by doing that, it really does feel like they're getting away from some of the things that have made them good as a team. And I think there needs to come a point where, as opposed to trying to work around who those players need to fit into who you are. Because if not, what are you doing shifting everything with, 30, 35 games left in the season when you start making these moves and trying to change who you are as a team to fit these guys in. Those guys, they have to fit in themselves. Maybe next year you can run a bunch of different play sets that make sense for DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine together. But for now, like those guys need to be watching film of the players that were there before and some of the players that are still there and trying to emulate the play sets of what they've already been doing in order for them to find success. And I get, the isolation stuff with DeMar DeRozan. That's going to be a part of who he is no matter what. But there's a way to work the isolation stuff into the game where it's not just like the ball is moving, it's flowing, all of a sudden it just stops. And they just haven't figured out how to do it yet. So I don't know. They're running out of time for this season,
Right.
and like I feel in certain ways I feel bad for Doug because he's teaching like he's trying to coach like master's or PhD level coaching here,
Yeah.
and he's still in his first 30 games as a head coach in the NBA. And this just isn't easy stuff to deal with, like dealing with a complete roster overhaul, dealing with like swapping out your 1A and bringing in new pieces. Like none of this is simple. Like the dysfunction behind the scenes, how this team is splintered and fallen apart, like none of that is simple to deal with. And, you're dealing with a first year head coach who not only is he trying to like bring all these guys in and trying to fit them in, but you're also like trying to rework your entire rotation and like how these pieces fit together on the fly. And, that's why I think waiting till the NBA trade deadline is never a good idea to make your moves. You should make your moves as many as possible in the off season and then try to tweak some of your deficiencies during the season. And that's just not what this team does. And so you put your coach, whether it's Doug or it's Mike Brown or it's Luke Walton or anyone else, you're always putting them at a disadvantage where they're constantly trying to have to change who and what they are as a team on the fly, and it's just not a recipe for success.
This is probably a terrible time to ask this question.
It's not exactly the most joyful conversation we're having, so feel free.
Yeah, I feel like we did the same thing on the Insiders. We just had this really downer of a conversation today because of the bad loss. But it's
I don't.
Valentine's Day.
I honestly don't think it's the bad loss. I think people. I won't. I'm sorry. I think Kyle has. I have had feelings about this team for like a couple of games now, and I just wasn't. If you're gonna win. Like we don't need to talk about it. Now they lost, and it's like, okay, now can we have like an overarching conversation here? But sorry, go ahead.
No, well, to your point though, I don't think anybody believes in this team. I think I'm a one-man wolf pack.
So you believe in this team?
I believe they can they can play better and they can turn things around.
What's that? What's turn things around look like?
I think they can get into the playoffs. Now, whether that's 6 seed or through the play in, I don't I'm not here to tell you that right now.
Okay.
But I think that about them. I think a lot of people feel I don't want to speak for either one of you guys, but like they're just cooked. Like they're not good. And I think that plays into they're not good and they can't be good. And I think that plays into just the overall morale of the fan base right now.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I think that they can win. I just think the way they're having to win, it's just so difficult, and you realize that when they're going to play better teams, it's going to become more and more difficult to pick up. And it's not just like a win here or win there. Like they need to win like, I don't know, 17, 18 games down the stretch here out of 27 to make the playoffs or to make the play in. Like that's where we're looking at, at a minimum, I would say they're probably going to need 15 wins, and you can go through their schedule, might be able to pick out 15 wins. But at the same time, like they have the
They
fourth.
lost to the Pelicans yesterday. You can't pick out 15 wins. Like you can't.
Exactly. And you have the the fourth most difficult schedule in the NBA left from here on out. And once you get past the first like 4 games of the post All-Star schedule, you're going to have probably the most difficult schedule from then on because those next 4 games aren't very good. Once you get past another game against Utah, games against Charlotte, a game against the Warriors, things are going to get dramatically more difficult. And like, look, I don't want to be doom and gloom for the next 27 games. I definitely felt like last night was a blow to like any chances they have. And it's weird to like point to one game and say, "Hey, I don't think they're going to be able to recover from that." But like there's a huge difference between being 3 games over 500 with 27 games left and being 1 game over 500 and then having to make up that game and knowing that you don't have a bunch of games against 12-win teams. And that's just the reality of the situation. And like the issues that they have, they're not going away. They have like very clear structural issues with this team, and they have added more pieces. And you could say even on like face value, they have more talent today than they did maybe in November or December. Especially when you add in like the Markel Fultz signing, Laravia, Valanciunas, and Zach LaVine. But the problem is, it's always going to be, do they fit together, or did you just accumulate pieces? Did you just go out and pull off a 2K trade that looked good on 2K, but when you actually play with the roster, it doesn't work? And those are things that should be like clear and evident before you make those moves. But at the same time, like this is the hand they're dealt, and you got to go out and play. And I think that's the most disappointing thing is that like going out and playing, you just have such a razor thin margin of error, and they made mistakes, and it cost them a game against a team that you just can't afford to lose to.
We'll come back. We've got a lot more to talk about with James Ham. I don't think it's not all doom and gloom. Last night sucked, not just because they lost, but because of everything else that happened. Like when you talk about the worst case scenario, it couldn't get worse than what happened for the Sacramento Kings last night. So we'll talk more about that, what this week might look like for the Kings, and of course their next game 1 week from tonight at the Golden One Center against the team that may be moving in the opposite direction of the Sacramento Kings. That, of course, is the hated Golden State Warriors. Ugh. So that's more. That's what's ahead here with James Ham of the Insiders here on Sacramento Sports Leader ESPN 1320.
Yo.
What you got going on this weekend, Ham?
Well, I'm not going to All-Star Weekend because
Mm-hmm.
Domas isn't going. We're gonna go out to dinner tonight. I
Nice,
think,
very good.
yeah, I think I'm gonna go on with Jake Gaden on Sunday.
There we go.
Yeah, to help out from home. I'll probably go on from home.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Not a whole lot else. I think I need a couple of days, just like everyone else does, just like the players do. Like the last couple of weeks have just been a barrage, a never-ending barrage of phone calls and text messages and podcasts and radio interviews and television interviews and writing and everything else. It's just like it does. It becomes a little overwhelming. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, again, I hate being all doom and gloom, but it's just like it's really difficult to see a pathway forward with like your starting point guard, shooting guard, and small forward. Like one of those guys and maybe two of those guys needs to not be there anymore, and that's even more complicated. Or one of those guys needs to go to the bench, and you got to have tough decisions and tough conversations.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much that matters.
Yeah.
I just don't, because he's still gonna play 30 minutes tonight. Keon's still gonna play his minutes. So KZ Okpalum, if you want to, like you're gonna have to figure out a way to play with these guys. And if you can't, then you can't. But I don't know if starting him or benching him is gonna change that much, because you're still gonna finish with him unless you're not.
Yeah. I just don't know that 18 minutes a game you can deal with the same three on the floor together. Like if you can survive those 3 minutes, those 18 minutes, 6 minutes to start the game, 6 minutes to start the third, 6 minutes at the end of the game. And even you can throw in the, 5 to 6 minutes at the end of the second quarter. Like those are going to be difficult. If you're playing, upwards of 16 to 24 minutes with those guys as a trio, you're going to give up 125 a night. And that's like at a bare minimum.
James hates the Kings.
No, I just hate being like that. I think last night was just like a clarifier, right? It was like, oh, now we all kind of understand where this thing is going and where sort of the deficiencies are, and I don't know how you pick them up and how you sort of trudge through it. But at the same time, it was one game. It's just a really big game to lose.
Tearing these little kisses up.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Where are you guys going to dinner, Hammer?
We're going to the clubhouse here in the lake. They have they're doing like filet mignon and lobster tail. Sounds pretty good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice stuff.
Casey, you got a clubhouse?
I don't.
Me neither.
Mm-mm.
All of the jokes we make about each other, James is for real.
That's facts.
James has like an actual armed security guard like outside of his house. Like all of the jokes I make about Kenny, like James, that's actually James.
It's his real life.
He has a lake, multiple boats,
Clubhouse.
a clubhouse, private chef.
Come on, man. What are we talking about, man? Come on.
We'll have to do one of those dinners with the private chef. That's a blast.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I told you it's one of your dudes
Mhm.
from Q, and like he either can come to your house and do it like a dinner party, or you can go to his house. Good stuff.
Is that tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, today's Friday.
Drewski funny, bro.
Today's Friday. That's right.
Drewski be cracking me up.
I think it's raining again.
Shouldn't be.
Doesn't look like it here.
It looks sunny outside, but I hear
it looks
the water dripping.
Huh.
No, Tyler, it's not $700 a
We're
person.
coming back, Hammer. Hammer just telling us about the extravagant life that he lives, man.
I mean, we can only wish.
Yeah.
Woo.
We said during the break, all of the jokes that me and Kenny make about each other, that's really James Ham.
That's facts.
It's really James.
That is facts.
You guys are ridiculous.
Real quick,
I married well.
Before we go back to the Kings, I wanted to ask you real quick. Did you see Juju last night?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Really good. I saw the
I
second
made
half
more
of
of an
that
effort
game.
to watch that game than rewatch the Kings game.
I watched the second half of that game, or watched it after it was done. And
special, man.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
she is special.
Mm.
She is special.
Mhm.
Women's game is in great hands, man. My goodness. James was saying during the break, I think it was like, we don't mean to be doom and gloom. Like I know a lot of Kings fans like, oh, this just feels too negative. And I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe it is like a little overreactionary. My thing is, I just feel like I keep looking at this team play, and you want to. They had that nice run when things started out with Doug, and everything is just kind of leveled out since then. You're probably gonna need one more nice run. Just you probably just one. Like you can't tank. You can't get awful and have a nice run. Like you can stay probably playing at the pace that you're playing at, but you probably need one more nice run to make sure you stay away from like Phoenix and San Antonio. But like you might also want to get yourself in a position where you're playing one playing game and not two.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm starting to think about is how can the Kings get in a position where they play one playing game instead of playing two?
Yeah, I mean, and that's where again a 4-game winning streak would have been really nice right here coming out of the break and going in up against, what do you have Golden State followed by Utah or maybe Charlotte then Utah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you had an opportunity to get that run, that 7-game win streak, maybe even 8 games. Like you start building from that, and you give yourself a little bit of a buffer zone. And I don't know where they come up with that run, but this team 2 years ago, they defied everything that we thought that they would be in the second half. We talked about it so many times how in the second half of the season when the real NBA starts, right? After the All-Star break is when the real NBA starts. The physicality cranks up, just everything cranks up, and the intensity of every game is just so magnified. And at this point, like who are they, and how do they come out of the break, and how do they who do they tell us and show us who they are, right? And they still have an opportunity. Like you're right, man. That they're right in the thick of things. They did take a step back in the standings last night, where they had a chance to go in trailing Dallas by a game up on Golden State, and sort of moving towards the teams that are in that 7-8 range, even like the 6 range, you might be able to get to. But that loss last night puts you just in a different frame of mind going into the break. I want to see what they can do. Like in those first couple of games, can they rebuild the momentum that they had? Can Doug get them on the same page and playing the right way? And for that matter, if you're going to give up 125 a night, can you score 130? Can you score 135? And make it not that big of a deal that you can't defend people. I mean, I think we all know like offense and defense are tied together, but there is a way in which this team can push the tempo and still be a really productive offensive team, even though they're going to have a lot of struggles on the defensive side of the ball. You just can't get into every single game and not have an ability to string anything more than like 1 or 2 stops down the stretch. And that's what we've seen the last couple of games, where it's just like they make every game extremely challenging to win. And the fact that they've won a couple of them is a positive. But the fact is you don't always want to be in that position where you're fighting from behind, or whether you're trying to be perfect down the stretch of a game in order to come away with a win. And they've got to clean it up a whole lot in order to like even mask some of their deficiencies down the stretch.
Sorry. It's not even getting better. It's just hide all the things you do wrong.
Well, that seems to be like
maybe that's how you get better.
Yeah,
it's like when you're a teenager, you throw everything under the bed and hide it in the closet, right? Like how do we mask it and see the room's clean? I swear.
You don't have time. Mom just pulled into the driveway. You don't
facts,
have
yeah.
time to clean the room.
Perfect
Like,
analogy.
you got to get this looking a certain type of way.
Mhm.
And people think it's doom and gloom. Like, it just is what it is. Like, it's number one. That's what people think about the team. That's their opinion. And if it's not all good, then it's not all good. Like, can't put lipstick on a pig. You know what I'm
I
saying?
mean, you
Like,
can.
you can. It
It's
wouldn't
still
make
a
no
pig.
difference.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's still a pig.
and that's just what it is. I think the only thing that I do think that this team that maybe others don't is I think they have room to get better. I think they can get better. I do think there's something to the whirlwind that's been the last 2 weeks with this group, and getting a couple days to take a breath, settle down, get your feet under you, and go back about the second half that way, or after the All-Star break that way.
Mhm.
And I wonder if that could help them a little bit. And just, and I still do think they're talented. They're clearly not this great defensive team, but they can put pressure on teams if they are a little bit more efficient and a little bit more deadly on the offensive end. That could put pressure on teams. That plays with people's minds sometimes when hey, they're going to put up 120, 125. We better score. We better not have no opportunity or give them an opportunity to go on a 15-0 run like they did last night, because we might be done. And maybe use their offense a little bit as their defense to a certain degree. So there's little things here and there where they can look to improve. Whether they'll be able to take advantage of it, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think if there is a silver lining to what happened last night, for me, it would be that there came a moment in that game where you just kept doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And, like, I think the players probably looked at each other after that game, at least a group of the players, and said, okay, like, look, we can't do that again. Like, DeMar, if you're not hitting, you just can't keep shooting and shooting and shooting and not giving anybody else a shot to try to win the game. And, like, you relied so heavily on him the night before to pick you up and carry you to the finish line. He like single-handedly backpacked that team against Dallas and picked up the win. But for as many times as we've seen that type of play where it's just like unstoppable, we also see the other type of play where when the shots aren't falling, he doesn't move off the ball and he keeps calling for it and keeps demanding that he takes the ball. And like in a situation where you start running out of timeouts and you're in crunch time, there needs to be moments where as a group you go together at like while somebody's taking free throws and huddle up really quick and say, hey, look, we're going to mix it up and it's not going to be the same exact play every single time. We need to go like, again, like last night's game is a perfect example where Zach LaVine had 32 points and 10 assists. He was excellent. He should have got the ball down the stretch. Malik Monk showed so much grit and so much guts late in that game, getting the rebounds, doing just everything that he could to try to will his team to win. Like there were times where he should have got a couple of those shots. And as a group, I think one of the good things that could come out of that is just to go like have a family meeting and say, hey, look, there are going to be times where we need to self-regulate and we need to have conversations that are awkward and not fun on the basketball court. And we need to say, look, it's somebody else's turn. Once you miss, 3 shots in a row in crunch time, that should be it. Like it used to be that De'Aaron Fox would hand it off to somebody else, or he would hand it off to DeMar, or DeMar would hand it back off to De'Aaron. But when you get to a point where one dude goes 0 for 7 in the final 4 minutes in overtime, that's really, really tough. And that's where, as teammates, you have to say something too. You've got to step up and say, look, we have to try something different. And I hope that they learn something from that specific situation. Not that they can't rely on DeMar, because a lot of times you can, but that when things aren't going right, that DeMar needs to let go and let somebody else have a turn to try to win the game. Whether it's Sabonis in the pick and roll, which was working great in the fourth quarter, or it's Monk going at the rim, which was working, or it's Zach LaVine, shooting the 3 ball, which again, he had 5 threes last night. There were other things working and you did not need the full DeMar DeRozan experience, but it was almost like they all just let it happen. And you can't, as teammates, just let that happen. Just you've got to step up and say, hey, we are going to run something different. DeMar goes and he gets in the post up. You swing it to the other side and you go back to the other guys and you say, nope, we're not doing it this time. And that's maybe it's a moment of growth where they can learn something from that.
Well, I'll tell you what probably will happen if, depending on how they view DeMar, which I think is pretty positive, they'll probably tell him, keep shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Keep shooting. We believe in you. You've made those shots a number of different times before. The other night wasn't your night. But I would tell him, it's Doug Christie, the coach, and Malik Monk, the point guard. If I give you the ball, I don't want you to think, and you feel like you're confident, shoot the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot the ball. I don't want you thinking twice about whether or not I've missed 3 in a row, so I don't want to shoot. Shoot the damn ball. That's what I need you to do.
Or pass. I don't know.
That's what I need you to do.
Find
Shoot
an open
rock.
teammate. I don't know.
You open.
No.
You're
Well,
DeMar
if
DeRozan,
you open, well,
you're open. The
DeMar-
shots in overtime, all 3 shots he shot in overtime that were breaks.
Yeah, if you open,
were wide open.
You take them.
Shoot the basketball.
Okay.
I would tell
you get
that
mad
to
at me. Shoot, I didn't
that
tell him
to
to do anything. Oh, holla at me. It's Valentine's Day. I don't need this.
To DeMar DeRozan. I would tell that to DeMontis Sabonis. I'd tell it to Keegan Murray. I would tell it to Zach LaVine.
I wouldn't tell it to Jake LaRavia, though.
Well, I would say, like,
he's at the free throw line. I would tell him that.
But even as a coaching point in that moment, like, everybody saw it, so it's not like you can hide from it. And everybody also saw, like,
they kicked it out to him. He took wide open shots. He missed the shot. He didn't call for the ball in overtime. In the fourth quarter, late in the game, they were trying to do the dagger thing, and he missed a couple of those shots. He missed them. In overtime, they had the ball. Monk had the ball. LaVine had the ball. They kicked it out to a wide open DeMar. He missed the shot. That's basketball. I want you to take those shots.
No, I agree with that, but I also, in that specific game, at what point do you watch what's happening on the court? And as a coach, you got to make the tough decision on the fly in that situation. And for me, I think that most of the players on the court were playing pretty well, except for DeMar missing shots and the fact that they weren't stopping CJ McCollum. And so
Keegan was non-existent, and he was getting destroyed on defense. And if we're going to say that, if we're going to be that way, Keegan was doing nothing offensively, wasn't grabbing any rebounds, and was getting torched. So why is he on the court?
By CJ?
Yes.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the problem is that you have to take your 6'8" power forward and go put him on a 6'1" guard, as opposed to maybe using the 6'5" guard who's a spectacular defender that's sitting on the bench.
Agreed.
And who scored 27 points the night before, hitting all kinds of threes, and who is actually effective in that game. And that's where I mean, like not to just single out DeMar in this one specific case, but like, you have an obligation to do what's best for the team. And what was best for the team is to find somebody else to defend CJ McCollum. And they did not do that. And that's where, like, Keon Ellis should have been in the game, but it becomes like, well, who sits? And I get it. It's difficult, but to be honest with you, it wouldn't have been Keegan, because while Keegan is maybe getting busted up there, like, he could have shifted over and defended Trey Murphy and given you 2 defenders on the floor. And then, and he had hit a 3. The last shot he took, he knocked down. They just didn't get him the ball. And so for me, I would have made a tough decision there, but singling somebody out isn't easy. And especially a longtime veteran Hall of Fame player, it's not easy. But this is about winning basketball games at this point. It's not about making sure that nobody gets hurt feelings, because at the end of the day, you're either going to get a job or you're not, based on wins and losses. You're either going to keep a job or not as a general manager based on wins and losses. And you got to do what's best for the team, not what's best for one person or what's best for one person's ego in a situation. And so, yeah, it would be an intriguing conversation to have off the record with some of these guys about specific situations like this. And maybe you would get an honest answer from them, but you're probably right, Kenny. They're just going to say, well, we just kept passing it to the guy that was open. And I was like, okay, well, that wasn't what was working before that play, before that segment of the game.
So Doug got a hold a little bit of this one then too, no?
Oh no, I think so. Yeah, but again, you're talking about a rookie head coach.
I know,
Yeah,
but we
yeah.
got to hold Doug accountable too, just like we hold these players accountable. There's, we stay on these players about, being ready night after night after night. I know Doug is adjusting to a lot of different situations, and he's pulled the right strings more times than not in his in his limited time as the head coach. You're going to get some wrong, and I think the consensus is, and far be it for me to say that he did, but I think the belief is he certainly may have pulled on the wrong strings last night.
No, I would agree, and I would even say I was really confused why, again, when Zion Williamson was going crazy the night before, why you didn't try the two big lineup then, because they were running two bigs at you the whole time. But then you ran the two big lineups when they had guys who just aren't very, they're okay, Makovic and Misi, but those guys aren't like they're both rookies. They aren't seasoned vets. To run Sabonis and Valanciunas together in that situation, I actually think that's where like New Orleans really got cooking from behind the arc, is when you went to that lineup, and it was only for a couple of minutes, but I was just confused why you went with it then, as opposed to when you couldn't stop a big man. That's when it seems like the two big lineup would have worked, and then on top of that, like I would have had Keon Ellis in the game, and I don't care who I have to have the tough discussion with afterwards. That's it. Like Keon Ellis needed to be in the game because CJ McCollum was crushing you. And CJ McCollum, I mean, what do you have? 26 in the second half of his 41. He was having a super quiet night all the way through until like mid second quarter, and then all of a sudden he started hitting a couple of threes. So I would have like figured out ways, but then again, like not being there and seeing how it was playing out, Keon got heated with the CJ McCollum situation. So I don't know if Doug pulled him off the court because like he couldn't calm down. But we all saw that situation where they threw the ball at each other and all that stuff. But I definitely would have had Keon Ellis in the game, especially with
Beating his
a
ass would
guy
have slowed
crushing
it
you.
down.
Yeah,
It's about the only thing that would have stopped him. Hey, how'd you slow CJ? We beat his ass in the third quarter. That's what happened.
yeah. And look at it
Say
there
we
in the
beat our ass.
in the chat. Stella, I think that's what it was. Yeah, CJ McCollum. They pointed out CJ McCollum had 6 points at half. He finished with what, 41?
Goodness gracious.
Oh no, 43. 43.
Everybody was getting it last night. Everybody
Yeah.
was getting it. It wasn't just Keegan. It wasn't just Keon. Zach Levine got it a couple times. Like everybody in transition, they all got some of the CJ's buckets last night. I think Keon should have been in that game at the start of overtime. And some of the tough decisions and tough conversations you got to have. I think I know I go on and on about it. It should have been with Keegan Murray. I don't know why he was out
we
there.
get
in
it.
that
You
moment.
hate Keegan Murray.
but it even goes to what I talked about as well. Why are you asking him to guard a 6'3" CJ McCollum?
I don't even think CJ's that big, but
yeah. Put the guard on him. Put the guard on him.
I will, in his defense, Kenny, every single player on the Kings roster ran a negative last night, except for Keegan Murray, who was a +7. Everyone else ran a negative. And I mean, plus minus isn't the greatest, but I will say, like, there were moments where Keegan was really good, and it's more because you went away from him as an offensive player than it is that, you asked him to do other things. And he didn't hit the glass heavy in the second half. I mean, finished with 8 rebounds, right? But that's because Domantas Sabonis became like a Hoover. I mean, he had 13 boards just in the fourth quarter alone, 28 for the night. I mean, he had 5 offensive rebounds in the fourth quarter as well. Like, there weren't a lot of other people like going in and getting rebounds, and sometimes that means that players like Keegan were setting screen. I mean, we're blocking guys out and keeping them away from the basket, so Domas could go and get those rebounds. And that's something that, without going back and watching the tape, like, how is it that they were getting those rebounds? Some of the time it is because your teammates were doing their jobs as well.
I think Keegan is really good at what he does. I just think in that situation, in overtime, there was He played. CJ was perfectly fine with Keegan Murray guarding him last night. Perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. This is what I talked about yesterday. He didn't feel any.
Do you
type
want
of
a shirt that says "I hate Keegan Murray"?
I like Keegan
a new
Murray.
tattoo. Oh my God!
I like Keegan Murray.
How you talk about me when you ain't here? If you like Keegan,
like
Murray.
Keegan Murray,
man,
I just don't think it's all DeMar.
I like.
I just
insert name as the kiss of death from Kenny Carroll.
Just wait till he starts calling him by his number.
No, in these situations, I just don't think DeRozan and Levine are
their
the
team
problem.
gotta be better.
I don't think they're the problem with what happened last night.
Shades
and
of 40.
If you want Keegan Murray, if you want Keon Ellis on the court, who was a -11 last night, for those that like to talk about those numbers, if you want him on the court, the answer isn't taking DeMar Levine off the court. If there's another guy out there getting torched.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say, like, you can turn it any way that you want. There's one guy who missed 7 consecutive shots down the stretch. I mean, so I would argue that in the late fourth quarter in the overtime session, that as much as anybody, it was just DeMar DeRozan not hitting his shots, and then it's tough.
Cam hates DeMar and Kenny hates Keegan. How do we feel about Markelle Fultz, Hammer?
Well, I mean, I think we're not going to have to watch Devin Carter minutes the rest of the season, which I think is interesting. I think Markelle Fultz is an interesting player. I'm not sold that he's like a defensive genius. He's not a good 3-point shooter, but he can score. He can distribute the ball. If you do have an injury to Malik Monk, he can't step in and be a point guard. So I'm intrigued by Markelle Fultz. I'm a little concerned that he hasn't played since May 5th in a game. Because last time I checked, May 5th was like 9 months ago, and that's a long time. So yeah, we'll have to see.
He's rested.
He is rested.
He's healed up. Fresh legs until he hits the wall like 8 games in. Oh, that's funny.
We'll see. I think he'll get some minutes. I don't know where though. Boy, that Jake Arabia, oh Jesus Christ. We'll start a backlash from the fan base. Continue to not play Keon Ellis enough minutes.
That's right.
Man.
You were saying about Jake LaRavia?
Oh, yeah, that hysteria hit quick and fizzled, man, didn't it?
That was like LA Knight.
That was the boy. This is the greatest debut in Kings history. And that was it. It was all done.
I do remember saying that don't worry about the contract. It'll take care of itself. Like, yeah.
Well, even in that game, he only had 7 points. So I think the contract would have been fine in that game where he made such an impact.
Yeah.
He's got a bench guy, though.
No, I like Jake LaRavia. I just, these people floating out there, he's going to get a 3-year, $24 million contract.
Kenny wants to give him to him right now. It's the old Buddy Hield thing. He wants to give him the deal right now.
24, Bill.
You wanted to give Buddy 24 per, if I remember
Buddy
correctly.
would still be on this team if he got that deal from Casey.
That's
He'd
right.
be on this team right now.
But Buddy Hield would be on the Kings forever if this franchise listened to Kenny Carroll.
Dude, what time we got?
You've got seconds.
30 seconds. PrizePicks.com. Go put your lineup in for All-Star Weekend. Guess what I did?
I don't know what
they got. All-Star Saturday night 3-point shootout. I went Buddy Hield 24 more.
Oh no!
More in that first round. Yeah.
Wow.
Must be present in certain state. PrizePicks.com for more details.
Download the PrizePicks app. Use the promo code
KIFM for $50 automatically when you put that $5 lineup in.
Have a great weekend. Hopefully, it's a 3-day weekend for you. We will see you back here Tuesday at 10 a.m. with the Insiders on Sacramento Sports Leader ESPN 1320.
Vamos All-Star Week.